these are the message that the Taliban yourself want to come by the support of some countries, some neighboring countries, to pass the message for the Afghan government, or they are claiming that they have upper hand at the battlefield. So the negotiations are very complicated and very complex now at this situation.
Let me just come in here and ask Mr. Porter that issue of complexity. The Taliban is not a single entity. When the war on terror began, Al-Qaeda was the term used for a broad spectrum of different groups. Our guest in Islamabad alluded to just some of the groups that are over in the border in Pakistan. How effective can these talks be if they're just talking to this and that leader of just certain factions? Will that in essence at all impact the Taliban as a broader spectrum group, or in any way impact its ideology?
You know, negotiations for peace between two warring parties are always complex in that both sides always have factions, differences of view about what should be negotiated, what concessions should be made, and which ones should be withheld. I think these negotiations will be no different from any other war in that regard, but I would not exaggerate the degree to which the Taliban or I should say the Afghan insurgents, including the Quetta Shura Taliban and the Haqqani network, can basically agree on a strategy to negotiate with NATO and the United States forces. I think that they are perfectly capable of arriving at a common strategy for those negotiations. And I would simply recall that if we go back to the Iraq War, the argument was made that it's impossible for the United States to negotiate with the Sunni insurgents because there are different groups of insurgents who will have different interests and so forth. It turned out that those insurgents were perfectly capable of coordinating not only their military operations but politically as well. And I think that was an argument that really was obscuring the truth that the United States simply was not interested in negotiations. We're going to hear that same argument made this time around, and I think that should be viewed with a great deal of skepticism.
And of course, Mr. Hamid, there are the regional aspects to this as well. General Petraeus, when he made his comments, he talked about facilitating Taliban commanders entering Afghanistan and going to Kabul. So he's saying they're coming from outside the country. We could take an educated guess here, considering what's going on in Pakistan, that he very well might mean Pakistan. What is Pakistan's role in all this? It was a Taliban ally and it's played it on the wire over the last few years. How can Pakistan either help or hinder this whole process?
You see, this is where Pakistan feels that the Americans are simply passing the buck. The American presence in Afghanistan and their defeat has got nothing to do with Pakistan. Americans did not come there after taking permission from it. And neither Pakistan is responsible for their upkeep. So the fact is that Pakistan is not supporting either the Mullah Umar group or the Jalaluddin Haqqani group or the Hikmatyar group. Even in 10 years of war, Americans have not come up with a single proof that Pakistan is supporting them with equipment, weapons, money, supplies, or training camps or bases. Nothing. The Pakistan has the experience, they have the will, the capability, and the geography that what Pakistan did to the Soviets, it can be done to the Americans as well. But it has not been done. So it means it's not being done. And Pakistan is itself involved in an insurgency within its own borders, fighting a high-intensity war in Swat and tribal areas. Pakistan has suffered more than the Americans have suffered in Afghanistan. And Pakistan is already hands full. So these things, they're saying that there's a Quetta Shura which is coordinating an attack in Afghanistan and Americans are facing the defeat because Pakistan has been supporting the Taliban, is barking up the wrong tree entirely. And that is precisely the reason here you find the Americans in this mess that they are in today, that their threat analysis is wrong, their perception management is wrong, their understanding of the Afghan scenario is wrong, and completely they have been absolving themselves of a wrong strategy of betting on Karzai, who has got absolutely incapable government, and their
Well, let me pick up on this
incapacity to
point.
understand the Afghan
Let me
system.
pick up on this point with Kabul, with Hamid Karzai and his government, and the seemingly more independent stance he's trying to take on these issues. He's set up his High Council for Peace, as he's called it. 70 members. The chairman is a former Afghan president. There's former militants and leaders in there. There's Taliban commanders, parliamentarians, 8 women in that High Council as well. Mr. Nourzad, could this council make a difference? Could it work?
Yes, of course. We believe that this council would have a clear strategy. This council would have a clear message for the Taliban, because in this council we have some former ministers of the Taliban themselves, but they successful of this council belongs to Pakistan. We believe that even some NATO countries believe that the Quetta Shura, under the leading of Mullah Omar, Gulbuddin Hekmatyar and Haqqani, they are operating from Pakistan. If Pakistan do not put pressure on these groups to refer to the reconciliation, we believe that there wouldn't be any positive steps. On the other side, we believe that the United States that getting a package of aids to Pakistan, and this aid indirectly goes to Taliban, the United States must itself put pressure on the Pakistan government to put pressure on the Taliban, on these 3 groups, that there is no ways in the battlefield only for the reconciliation or on the political resolution in Afghanistan. We believe that if the neighboring countries, especially Pakistan, do not be censored in this issue, as the Pakistan Prime Minister itself says that if the Pakistan do not enter to the negotiation, there would be a positive steps. We believe that's correct.
Okay.
But the international community must put pressure on Pakistan to make these 3 groups to come to
reconciliation. Let me get Mr. Hamid's response in here, because what's being said is that no, okay, there's no direct support of these groups, but Pakistan could be doing more.
You see, Pakistan is already doing enough to fight the insurgency which is being pushed into Pakistan from Afghanistan. The question which nobody likes to ask and answer is that who is supporting the insurgency which is waging a bloody war inside Pakistan? Are Afghan Taliban or Hekmatyar or Haqqani supporting this insurgency? Is Pakistan army funding the Pakistani Taliban to fight a war against Pakistan itself? Or their bases, equipment, weapons, supplies, and money is coming from Afghanistan, which is occupied by NATO and the Americans and the Karzai regime and the Indians. Now, unless and until Afghans come to this basic point, that who is supporting the insurgency inside Pakistan, Pakistan would always take a personal offense at the allegations that Pakistan is supporting the war inside Afghanistan. As I've said earlier, if Pakistan would be supporting the insurgencies, Americans would already have ended up like the Soviets ended up. Pakistan has the means, will, capacity and the capability to do it. But it's not been done. It means it's not being done. And so allegations are not taken lightly in Islamabad.
Let me pass the final comments, because we're short for time, over to Mr. Porter, and spend a few minutes talking about, you're seeing the situation here for Afghanistan. It's a situation that's been going on for decades. They didn't manage to deal with the situation under the Soviets. Then the United States was funding the Taliban. Would it just be better for the United States to get out of the situation? Or is it a fact that, you know, realities on the ground means that they cannot do that?
I think the answer to those questions is, in both cases, is yes. It would be better for the United States to get out. It is impossible for the United States, and here I disagree with both of my colleagues who have spoken on the program. I think that the United States, first of all, has put all the pressure that it's capable of putting on the Pakistani government to change its policy toward Afghanistan. And I think that the United States government knows very, very well that the interests of Pakistan are very different from those of the national security state of the United States in regard to Afghanistan. And I think that game is over. I think that it's now acknowledged at the very top of the U.S. government that the United States is not going to be able to get any further than it has in terms of using pressure on the Pakistani government. And I think that the answer clearly is the United States is going to have to withdraw its forces from Afghanistan. It's going to have to give the Afghan insurgent leadership a timetable for withdrawal, at the very least, in order to be able to calm the situation, in order to have an end to the fighting. There will not be a complete political settlement as part of that, as far as I can see.
Is there any indications to when that might happen? You've alluded to the fact that the United States is not ready to sit down and have any direct negotiations, but do you think it's ready to indirectly pass the message on that, yes, we will get a timeline in place? Countries like Britain already have a timeline for withdrawal.
Well, all I can say is that I think that mid-2011 is going to be the very latest date by which we will have signals that the U.S. government is ready to pull the switch on negotiating with the Taliban. It's very difficult for me to imagine that the Obama administration, President Obama himself, who clearly, as we now know from the Bob Woodward book, understands that this is a failed war, that it cannot succeed. He has only one option, and that is to begin a process of negotiations, unless he's going to basically withdraw unilaterally over a somewhat longer period of time, which is, it's possible, but I would think that from his point of view, it makes more sense to try to negotiate.
We'll have to leave it there. I'd like to thank all our guests for joining us this programme. To historian and investigative journalist giving us his comments there, Gareth Porter in Washington, to journalist and political commentator Abdul Hamid Nourzad in Kabul, and also to defence analyst and security consultant Zaid Hamid in Islamabad. Many thanks to you as well. Do stay tuned. Your headlines are up in just a few moments' time here on Press TV.